Thanks for tuning in to Ole Miss football coverage on the Our Lads Football Network, the OFN Today. Neal McCready joining us once again from Rivals. Neal, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, glad to be with you. Thanks for
All right,
having me.
Neal. So when we talked in the preseason, this is about the time that we figured maybe we'd get an opportunity to talk again. There was an opportunity for the team to potentially go undefeated by the time they played Alabama, with the toughest game being that LSU road trip. And sure enough, that was the one blemish on the schedule. But there's still a chance for Ole Miss with the matchup coming up this week against Alabama. It's not going to be an easy task with Alabama coming off a loss. But if Ole Miss is going to have any chance to play in the SEC championship game, they have to win this game this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's right in front of them. They've got to beat Alabama, and then they've got to run the rest of the table, which includes a trip to Arkansas. It includes an Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving night against Mississippi State. And at this point, they'd have to have some help, either from Arkansas or Texas A&M against LSU to get there. So there's a lot of ifs. But look, you're 8-1 going into the 3 games in November. I think most people probably around that program would have taken that if that had been offered. And here it is. And you catch Alabama coming off of a loss, like you said, kind of in a weird spot for Alabama. They're not used to playing games that are inconsequential. And for them, considering where they usually are and their goals each and every year, and realistic goals, I mean, their goal is to play for the national championship. Well, they're not playing for that now. They're not winning the national title. They're not. Realistically, they're not getting to Atlanta. They're not playing for the SEC championship. So this is unfamiliar territory for them. They're used to playing the big game. They're not used to playing the inconsequential game. So how they respond remains to be seen. I know people talk about Saban and the process and all of that stuff. They're humans. Human nature would be to have a little bit of a letdown. Whether they actually have one or not in Oxford remains to be seen, and whether Ole Miss could take advantage of it if they did remains to be seen, but it's certainly an interesting spot.
I would venture to say then the win by LSU was actually a disappointing result for Ole Miss.
For sure. I mean, some of the kids that I do shows with on MPW Digital have admitted that. They're cheering for Alabama. If Alabama wins, number one, the game would have had more juice. I think game day was coming to Oxford had Alabama won. I think. Obviously, Ole Miss would have controlled its own destiny. They wouldn't have had to worry about what happened with LSU down the stretch. So yeah, there was certainly a letdown, which is an interesting spot for Ole Miss because, it's conceivable now that they could go 11-1, not go to Atlanta, and not make the playoff despite going 11-1. And I think if you tell most SEC teams before the season, hey, you're going 11-1, they go, hey, I'm in the playoff. And it's conceivable that for Ole Miss that second half in Tiger Stadium could be really, really costly. But as it stands, they can't worry about that. They've got to try to just focus on Alabama. And then if you beat them, you see what happens. I mean, here's the interesting thing about Saturday too is that I think LSU is going to beat Arkansas handedly, but Vegas has it as a 3-point line. Maybe Vegas knows something. So, what's interesting about Saturday is it's conceivable that 30 minutes before kickoff, the fourth quarter in Fayetteville's kind of rolling along and it's a close game. And so you've got that potential distraction as well, where you're like, well, what's happening in Fayetteville? And, so it's an interesting spot for both teams. Ole Miss still has a whole lot to play for potentially. But if they lose to Alabama, they don't at that point. So they just have to focus on that. But again, they're kids. They're normal. They're people. They're not robots. And so you've got all the mental stuff that's going on with both teams. It's a completely different game than what we thought it might be 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and even though Texas A&M is just falling apart right now, the fact is that if that game does mean LSU wins, they're in. They lose, Ole Miss still has a shot, meaning they would have beaten Alabama and so forth. Then we all know, just like you said, they're kids. We all know, we've seen pressure situations unfold before, that anything can happen. So I wouldn't even be surprised if that Texas A&M game might be even tougher for LSU because of all the pressure that they may be under.
Well, yeah, you just never know. The game's in College Station, and when Weigert's the quarterback, I think they maybe found something there that makes them a little more balanced. You have Devin Achane. You still have a very active talented defensive front. Whether A&M's checked out by that point remains to be seen. Who knows, man? It's college football. And I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I think if we watch it, people say, how many dominant teams are there? I don't know, maybe Georgia. And then, you watch Georgia play at Missouri and you're like, but they're
Sure.
fallible. You say maybe Ohio State, but Ohio State was, playing with its food against Northwestern, and that game got interesting for a while. So I don't know that there is a dominant team. I don't know that there is any one result that is just completely out of the question as it pertains to good teams. Look, if you told me that Ole Miss beat Alabama, beat Arkansas, and then had their hands full with Mississippi State, I'd buy it. You just never know, how it all shakes out, and that's why, the really good teams. Nick Saban's been able to do this for a decade and a half at Alabama. The really good teams focus one game at a time, and it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason, and it's the challenge for Ole Miss this week. And they have not played particularly well down the stretch. They did not play well in the second half at all at LSU. They flirted with disaster at Texas A&M a few times, but they were able to win that game. They've got an open date that came at a really good time. They were an exhausted team after playing 9 games in 9 weeks. They are fresh now. They should be a little healthier than they've been in a while, and we'll see. It's not a great matchup in my opinion. I think from a matchup standpoint, Turner, Anderson off the edge gives Ole Miss real problems. Ole Miss doesn't have that over-the-top wide receiver that can take advantage of sometimes what I think are a little deficiency in the Alabama secondary. On the other side, I don't know that Ole Miss has that linebacker that can spy Bryce Young the way that Perkins did for LSU. And then on the other hand, and we're running out of hands here. I guess we're turning into an octopus, but you've got LSU maybe provided a blueprint of sorts on how to slow Alabama down a little bit, how to make it a second half game. Pressure up the middle on Bryce Young, keep him in the pocket. I'm not sure Bryce is completely healthy, and so there's a lot there, as there typically is in November.
All right, let's talk about the team itself, the players. Well, before we do that, I have to obviously ask you about Kiffin. I was on with Brian Matthews actually a couple of days after the firing over at Auburn, and so Kiffin's name seems to be at the top of the list. Everybody's talking about Kiffin and Auburn. What do you know, and what do you think about Lane Kiffin, and whether or not you think? Because I know I asked this question in the preseason. So, what do you think about Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss?
As it pertains to Auburn, I don't think it's a great fit. I've been on the record saying that. I covered Auburn for years, worked in that state for a long time. I don't think I've covered Lane now for 3 years. I don't think that Lane and Auburn fit each other at all. Money can take care of a lot of that, obviously. If you tell me that Lane Kiffin is the next coach at Auburn, I will immediately assume that he got a historic contract, that he got a deal that is close to 9 figures, maybe is 9 figures, is almost all guaranteed, eye-popping national headline type.
He can't turn it down money. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ole Miss can go. I know there's the 4-year state thing, but they can go through their foundation and make it a bigger contract than that. And I think they will, and I think they want to. Now, are they going to go to $100 million? Almost certainly not. And then for Lane, you got here's your thing. If you're Lane Kiffin, and I don't know him well enough to know the answer to this. If you're Lane Kiffin and you take the Auburn job, you're taking some historic contract that probably locks you in there for a long time. Is that the job you want? Or do you have your eyes deep down set on something bigger? And then here's the other part, and boy, Auburn people really bristle at this. Yes, historically, Auburn is a better job than Ole Miss. No question. No doubt. But right now, today, is it? Today? I don't know. And so if you're Lane Kiffin and you're talking about the next 2 years, because, look, some bigger jobs are going to open up. Maybe it's Alabama. Maybe it's Texas A&M. Maybe it's Texas. Maybe it's, I don't know, whatever. Name your big-time school, right? Florida. One of those jobs opens up. Do you want to be winning at Ole Miss or starting over rebuilding at Auburn? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe the answer is Auburn. I don't know. But Auburn hasn't been winning the
Sure.
last couple of years. Ole Miss has. Lane's figured out how to win at Ole Miss pretty consistently now for 2.5 years. Can he do it forever? I don't know. Can he do it for another year? He's got a lot of talent coming back next season. Does he bet on himself? He's going to get a big raise. Ole Miss is going to pay him more money. He's going to have money locked up. It might be $60 million as opposed to 100.
How much money do you need?
Well, I'm not going to ever be the guy that goes, oh, well, if you can make 100, if you can make 60, what difference is 105?
Sure.
The answer is $45 million. That's the answer to that. That's consequential. But I don't know. Does he decide, hey, there are jobs I'd rather have, and I'm willing to gamble on myself and bet and wait? Lane's only 47 years old. I don't know. We'll see. I don't put as much stock. If you tell me that Auburn pursues Lane Kiffin, sure. But if you tell me that Auburn really, it's one thing, right, to talk about $105 million. It's another thing to put it in. It's not monopoly money. And look at Texas A&M. Nothing against Jimbo, but I think if Texas A&M had his brothers, they'd cut bait right now. They can't. Why? Well, because the contract is insurmountable at this moment. That's a bad spot to be in. And when you hand out one of those contracts, who knows? And everybody goes, well, that wouldn't happen with Kiffin. That's what we said about Fisher.
Yeah. Well, look, and if this was 10 years ago, that might be different. But times have changed. The transfer portal, of course, and Kiffin has used it as good as anybody, has made teams that, like you said, Auburn has had all the history over Ole Miss maybe, but it's just a different game now. And you can...
Totally different, and you don't really know where it's going.
Yeah.
And, where's it going in 2 years? Does the transfer portal turn into the wild, wild west, or does it settle down? No one knows the answer to that. People say, well, you can't recruit at Ole Miss. Well, historically, you can't. But what if the NIL money what if the NIL market settles down to where you could? They've grown their, what they call it, the Grove Collective at Ole Miss. They've grown it quite a bit just in the last few weeks under the threat of Kiffin leaving. So I don't know. When people say things are established in today's college football, I kind of push back and go, how do we know? Everything's changed. There's no question that over the last 30 years, Auburn's been a better job than Ole Miss. No question about that. Anybody who pushes back on that is nuts. But how do we know it will be that much better of a job for the next 30 years? And I can tell you this, Lane Kiffin is not the kind of guy that is thinking 5-10 years down the road. Lane Kiffin's a right now guy.
And right now, Ole Miss has the edge. So,
there are places where he would leave for tomorrow. Yeah. Sure. If Alabama called, he's gone. If Texas called, Texas A&M, it's like that are LSU. Like if Lane Kiffin could get the LSU job, no doubt. He wanted the LSU job last year, absolutely would have crawled to Baton Rouge. But LSU's a better job than Auburn. Alabama's a better job than Auburn. Here's the thing about Auburn, and Auburn doesn't like this. But for right now, today, when you go to Auburn, the first thing is that you are compared to Georgia and Alabama, two of the premier programs in the country, two programs that have it going. I mean, people can say, well, Saban's losing a step, whatever. Okay. I'm not ready to go there. And Kirby's clearly not losing a step. So, I mean, Georgia's probably the preeminent program in the country today. Well, you're compared to them every day. That's who you compete against. That's who you recruit against. I don't know. That Auburn roster's got to be rebuilt. So I don't know. We'll see. Because, well, they have NIL money. I get it. Everybody else does too. So, I just don't think it's the no-brainer unless Auburn throws some crazy contract at him, and something tells me they don't go that route when you could probably hire Hugh Freeze for half that price.
Before I let you go, a few things I wanted to touch up on are the players. Of course, we're just starting our coverage of the 2023 draft, but it's a slow process. 6 months to go, but this is the perfect time to talk about it because we can reference actual games that people can watch now. And let's talk about you tell me right now, who is the number one prospect who is eligible for the 2023 NFL draft on this roster?
Oh, it's probably still Zach Evans, even though he hasn't had the special season that maybe he wanted. Quinshon Judkins has taken a lot of the steam away from that, but it's still Evans. He's still an impactful NFL style running back who can catch the ball out of the backfield, can uh, I think thrive in today's NFL. It's still
By
him.
the way, Judkins, could he be? He should be freshman All American, correct? I mean, he's been an amazing talent this season.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think he's freshman All American. I think it's him and probably Gibbs at Alabama and Sanders at Arkansas competing for All
Yeah.
SEC. I mean, he's had a special season. He's a terrific back.
Okay. So, and by the way, Evans still has eligibility left. So, do you have any idea if you think he'll stay or not?
No,
Still,
no
still
clue.
up in
I
the
mean,
air. Okay.
yeah, I don't. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. I haven't even
Sure.
gotten to that.
You haven't heard
So,
anything. Okay. Mingo, they haven't had the receivers that they have had over the last several years, but Mingo's at the top of the list. He's got that big 22-yard average per catch, which is eye-popping. What kind of a
yeah.
prospect do you think he might become? Is he a blazer? What is that the thing he's got going for him?
He's
No.
not a blazer. He's got really good hands. Runs good routes. Big physical body. Good blocker. He'll play in the league.
Defensively, Troy Brown came over from Central Michigan. He's leading the team in tackles. How good has he played?
He's really played well. He's been for them incredibly impactful. They would have been lost without him. And in fact, you saw some of that in the second half at LSU. He didn't play because of his shoulder injury, and they weren't the same defense. So he was able to come back and play a good bit against A&M, and they improved defensively. He's been really good. He gambled on himself transferring to an SEC school, and I think he's raised his stock.
Kerry Coleman, he's got some pretty decent stats for Ole Miss, leading the team in tackles for loss. What kind of a player is Coleman?
Yeah, he's raw, very athletic, raw. Got some time. I think he still has some eligibility left. He'd be advised to come
AJ
back.
Finley, safety.
Yeah, AJ's going to play in the league. He could have come out last year and draft, fifth, sixth round. I think he's raised his stock, and yeah, he'll play in the league. He's a physical safety, understands coverage, smart kid, a lot of leadership skills, all the intangibles, all that stuff.
And the offensive line. We started talking early when the season began about they had 3 quality players on the line. It was Broker, Brooks, and James. Have any of them elevated their games this season?
I think Broker's had a good year at guard. He's had to play some tackle as well, so he's versatile. I think that will help him, obviously, at the NFL level. He's a very good run blocker, getting better in his pass sets. James, I think one of the reasons he stayed was to move to left tackle and get that job, and they've shifted that around. He's back at right tackle, playing some guard, actually playing a lot of guard right now. Probably not the season he imagined it would be. And for Mason Brooks, it's been probably a very disappointing season for him. I mean, he got a concussion in fall camp, kind of got replaced, hasn't really played much. This is, it's been a challenge for him. Absolutely fantastic human being, though. And, whether football's in his future or not, Mason Brooks is going to be just fine.
And lastly, I know he's not a draft prospect at this point, but quarterback situation, it was really dicey early on in the season, but Dart's taken over as the number 1 guy. What are the pros and cons of Jackson Dart?
Oh, I really like him. 19-year-old kid, very athletic, tough. He's picked up the offense pretty quickly. He's cutting down on his mistakes. The knock on him was that he was, reckless with the ball. He's been anything but that. I think the improvement that he's just got to become more accurate with the deep passing. He's got to become a little more comfortable with some of that. Probably would look different if they had a blazer who could take the top off the field. But, no, I think Jackson's been really, really good.
So next year is the year that the expectations are going to be there, that he really elevates his game, hopefully.
Yeah, I would think, you put him and Quinshon Judkins in the backfield together next season. If they can get out in the portal, add a receiver or two. They've got a kid coming in, Aiden Williams, that they're super high on at wide receiver. Needs some speed on the outside to help. Michael Trigg should be healthy and ready to go next season at tight end. He's been out with a collarbone injury for a few weeks. Yeah, they've got a chance to be pretty interesting on offense. Look, it's a Lane Kiffin team. They're going to score points. They're going to move the football and those kind of things. Like I said, I mean, it's not that he would stay at Ole Miss for that personnel grouping. That would be stupid. No one's saying that. But I also don't think that he's like rushing for the first train out. Either.
How is the recruiting? How's it going?
Good. They're solid. They're recruiting a lot of 4-star kind of kids, and they're going to be super active in the portal. That's just what they are. And I think they've kind of, at least at this point, they feel like they've kind of found their niche, and they're going to go with
Neal,
it.
I appreciate it. I look forward to hopefully getting the opportunity to talk to you, maybe either sometime around bowl season, unless Ole Miss makes a miraculous run for the SEC championship. Best of luck on Saturday. Should be a lot of fun. And if not bowl season, definitely at some point during the off season, maybe catch up on some of these other players and how things are going with the program. So again, I appreciate it. Thanks you very much for taking your time out today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. See you.